All right, so our next part is looking at or beginning to understand differences and changes. The focus is on time, geography, and language. So, going back to our workbook, by differences, we are looking at how religion can take form and be shaped and reshaped and reshaped. It can change, changes in beliefs, changes in practices. We're going to focus on how to limit or discern the scope of what is studied in religious studies once we have looked at several other factors. So, while this isn't a writing task, what I'd like you to do is think back to when you were 6, 7, 8 years old, taking a deep assessment of things. Would you say that your beliefs and behaviors are 100% the same now at your current age as they were then? Or would you say that there might be some aspects of your beliefs that have developed or changed? That your actions are not the same? Or perhaps they're understood differently than when you were younger? Now let's take this a step further and look at the life of a friend, a parent, a grandparent, of a religious or spiritual leader you know. And over the period of time that you've known them, have any of their beliefs changed? Have any of their behaviors changed in relation to religion or spirituality? Have they grown in their understanding, which has led to slightly different beliefs? Now let's look past 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, 1,000. Would you say that there have been advances and changes in the world that could lead to differences or changes in belief that have led to the ability or inability to practice things differently? I mean, just in the last 25 to 50 years, has technology, especially on this global interaction that we have through the internet, do you think that has the ability to, or that it actually has changed beliefs and practices? Your answers to these questions are likely to be that the greater the span of time, the greater the chance that the beliefs or actions may have been altered. Often these can be minor alterations as new interpretations arise of how, in modern times, we find, interact with, and behave in response to the ultimate. When there is war versus peace, when there is famine and hunger versus when we have plenty of food on the shelves, when we're going through a global pandemic and when we're not, when we're able to have close-knit families and when that is harder, when we are successfully going through college and when we are struggling, when we're looking for a job, when all these different times, our beliefs, our practices are likely to change in some degree. Alterations to belief and practices can also arise based on geography, based on where we live. This can be due to the community moving to another region or as weather patterns impact an area. And I'm not just talking about natural disasters. You see, we will learn about some examples of this as we go through the course, especially as we look at different traditions in Buddhism, variations between Sephardic and Ashkenazi communities in Judaism. But let me give you an example to get you started with this. Let's say there was a tribal group, an indigenous group, up at the up at the base of Mount Rainier in Washington State. And this group believed that in order to become an adult, in order to go through the process of, really being welcome into the community, they have to go and, I don't know, encounter a wild bear, live through a blizzard, something involving the mountain and the predators that live there, or just the elements of snow and rain, massive rain. And for whatever reason, this tribe is going to move to another region. And they end up finding themselves down in the Keys in South Florida. New geographical setting. Entirely new groups of kids that they're coming of age. And they need to do these rituals that have been practiced for hundreds of years. But the fact is, the kids may not even understand what a mountain is, what a giant bear is. And yeah, there is still rain. So maybe it's that one has to survive a hurricane. But it's not the same. So the rituals have to be updated. Maybe it's now a gator. Maybe it's swimming out to a sandbar instead of climbing up a great mountain. But you see, these coming of age ceremonies have to evolve based on the geographical settings. In the Ashkenazi and Sephardic worlds, when we get to Judaism, you'll watch a video and it'll talk about how what is eaten at this one part of a sacred meal over Passover it consists of different items because that's what's available in the geographical area. And even today, as we think, well, we have global trade, but look at what happened as a result of the pandemic. Certain types of foods and supplies and traditional items might not have been available. And so you have to figure out, what do we do instead of? How do we practice in this different geographical space because of different things happening around the world? So one other thing is language. So we often take it for granted that the language of a sacred text may have been translated numerous times, or that even language itself changes. Language itself changes over time and geographical settings. Somebody who speaks Spanish in Spain does not speak the same Spanish that is spoken in Puerto Rico, which is different than the Spanish in Mexico, which can be different than the Spanish that is found in a Mexican community in the US. English that is spoken in Britain is different than the English that is spoken here. Words can have different connotations depending on the social group or the context in which the word is used. If someone says, that room is dank, that could mean that it is dark, unpleasant, damp, musky, even chilly. Or, these days it can mean the exact opposite. It could be a cool, chill place to hang out. That it is a good, high-quality room. Yeah. See, what happens when we start to consider these variations within a language? What happens when we see that even sacred texts and stories are written in a language that is changed over time? Think about Shakespeare. That isn't even, it's hundreds of years ago, but it's not thousands. The younger of our sacred texts we will look at or learn about in this class is still written 1,000 years ago. Language changes. So how does that impact what we learn? How does that impact our own sacred text or the sacred texts of other people? And again, never mind what happens when it has been translated. Are there always words? Like if you speak English and you're trying to learn Spanish, is there always an equivalent word? Is there always an equivalent word in French when somebody is speaking German? We have hundreds of languages, and sometimes figuring out which word to use can be harder than we think. Because there's always those connotations. There's always those changes in language. So in task 3, we see in our current time period words and symbols changing or altering their meanings. Just as a little tidbit here, let's think about the swastika, which in Hinduism for well over 4,000 years was a good positive sign. And not just in Hinduism, but in indigenous and tribal groups around the world. Yeah, in less than 100 years, the swastika is now a symbol of evil. Why should we be conscious of how words, phrases, symbols, and translations change, or what older or original meanings might be? And also think about those changes when you want to change the meaning of a word or you see that there are new meanings. Think about what that can do for your own time period, for your own generational experience, but also for the experience of other generations, both past and future. All right, that wraps this one up. Next, we're going to go into the approaches to the study of religion.